right, we're ready for block 7. This is a single Irish chain. It has a lot of pieces and they look really small, but it's easy to sew, I promise. So let's cut the pieces. For the center, you'll need a 1.5 inch square, and for these outer corners, you'll need 8 1-inch squares. Yes, that's right, 1-inch squares. For the colored part of your block, you'll have 4 1 by 1.5 inch rectangles and 4 1 by 2.5 inch rectangles. For the 6-inch block, you will start with a 2.5 inch square in the center and 8 1.5 inch squares for the corners, 4 1.5 by 2.5 for the inner rectangles, and 4 1.5 by 4.5 for the outer rectangles. So let's get sewing. If you ignore this outer round, you'll see the inside is just a 9 patch. So we're just going to sew those together. And you have to line up those edges. Finger pressing seams toward the darker color. You can always go to the iron and press your seams if you would like to. I'm using these nice batiks from Island Batik, so they finger press really nicely. I usually sew with the smaller shape on the top, just so you have more control and can see where everything's at. Make sure your seam allowances are laying correctly and feel for those seams to nest. Flip it over and do the same thing. This is a teeny tiny little block here, so be patient. It is a little fiddly to get everything lined up. Your little 9 patch for the center. You want to press that nicely, and that should measure 2 inches. 2 inches? 2.5 inches. Let's see. Yep, 2.5 inches. You can see here how it lines up there. From here to here is 2.5. So now when you put that in the middle, I'm a messy sewer, there's my threads. Lay that in the center, and you can see it's just another 9 patch. So we're going to go about sewing this together exactly in the same way. Your center does not match your outer pieces, then you know you have not been sewing with a good seam allowance. Flip it over here and sew the other row on. I'm being a messy sewer. I've got threads everywhere on this block. And I'm using yellow thread, which I wouldn't usually do, but I was working on something else and I wanted to get this video done. So sometimes I'm kind of lazy. I don't think the yellow thread will show. You do have to be careful when you're sewing with a lot of light fabrics, because sometimes your thread will show through a little bit. I once made a pink and white and red quilt, and I used up the last of a very, very pale green thread to sew the seams, and you can see the pale, pale green showing through on the seams. So that's pretty sad. I won't do that again. I don't think the yellow is going to show, and I'm not sewing any white to white, so I think it'll be okay. Definitely would not sew this with like a dark navy thread. Okay, I'm pulling that a little bit because I want to make sure that seam is nice and tight. Okay, one more seam. Gosh, this block looks tiny. That's all the seams. And there you have it. And it is indeed a 3.5-inch block. And yes, those little white squares finish out a 1/2 inch. But there it is. Isn't it pretty? This is a single 9 patch. So now I'm going to go trim up all those extra threads, and we'll see you tomorrow with block 8. I think we might be moving on to triangles. So hold your hats and be ready. See you tomorrow.